I have seen the way postmodernism can actually work. Hello everyone, welcome to Bound in Prose. I am your host Matt, and I am exhausted. But today we are going to talk about David Mitchell's Cloud Atlas. Now I am going to do my best today not to call him David Robert Mitchell, who directed It Follows, which is one of my favorite horror films, but no, David Mitchell's Cloud Atlas. It also has a movie adaptation that I really love, and I actually saw before I read this novel. I did not realize this was a book. I watched the movie, and I absolutely loved the movie. And then I found the book in the haunted bookshop in Iowa City, and I thought, I absolutely have to have a copy, and I have to read that like yesterday. So Cloud Atlas follows 6 distinct storylines, semi-distinct. They are tied together in very minute sort of ways, and if you're really paying attention, you can kind of see how one storyline affects the other, but we start off with like a very distant past, a very distant past with the Pacific Journal of Adam Ewing, and he is a man who has boarded like a slave vessel, and his story begins this novel, and then we go through each of the storylines. Everybody say hello to the big critic of the house. Yes, I know. And anyways, and then we kind of go into the distant future, and then midway through the novel we start progressing back to the beginning. Now I'm just going to go ahead and be a fuddy-duddy. I am not a super huge fan of postmodernism. I don't think it is a lesser type of medium, a lesser type of style. I just struggle so much to get into postmodern writing. I'm continuing to work on that in my reading journey, and I still challenge myself with postmodern writing. So if you've seen my videos before, you see that I have joked about Infinite Jest. I have read Infinite Jest cover to cover, and I can certainly appreciate what an incredible piece of work that is. I mean, anybody that can construct a novel the size and scope of Infinite Jest is worthy of praise. And obviously I know David Foster Wallace had a very dark ending to his life, and so I get that. And so whenever I joke about Infinite Jest, it is with some love in my heart. I just know that it's kind of in vogue that, people who like gush about that novel, it raises some red flags. But anyways, postmodernism, I have read Thomas Pynchon, I have read Gravity's Rainbow, Against the Day, I have read House of Leaves. I mean, so I am actively working to get into postmodernism, but this to me was the most accessible postmodern work that I have read. I had no issue following this. I had no issue getting into the storyline. I had absolutely no issue with this novel at all. So some of the other stories that we follow. So like I said, we have the Pacific Journal of Adam Ewing, a man who's on a slave vessel. The second story is about an amanuensis who goes to work with this very popular composer. We have sort of a journalistic mystery with Louisa Ray. We have an absolutely hysterical storyline with Timothy Cavendish, who is in financial troubles, and his brother basically tricks him into being committed to a retirement community that he can't get out of. We have a very futuristic sci-fi portion of the book, following the revelations of Sonmi 451, I believe. I got that right. It's been a long time since I read this book, but Sonmi 451. And then we have the final story that is basically the far, far distant future where people have almost become primitive again. And this novel is constructed really symmetrically. So we start off with the Pacific Journal of Adam Ewing, and we end with the Pacific Journal of Adam Ewing. And we progress to the furthest future, and then we backtrack in reverse order back to the Pacific Journal of Adam Ewing. So one of the things that I absolutely loved about this novel is Mitchell's ability to shift from genre to genre so effortlessly, and to tie each of these genres together into a cohesive storyline that, while it might not be super apparent on your first read, or if you see the movie, is not super apparent on your first watch, they do tie together in the end, and there is one complete storyline. And I have to go ahead and say, since my background is in music, I really connected with the second story, this amanuensis that has gone to work with this famous composer, and his storyline, even though it has a rather dark ending. But I think every single one of these storylines is so incredibly strong. And I think that having seen the movie prior to reading this helped me get through this a bit easier. Like I've said, with some of my postmodern readings, I struggle a bit, and maybe I'm not as smart as you, and that's okay. But I do, and I want to get better at it. But I felt like, no, this was super easy for me to follow. I kind of had some background with the movie. I kind of knew what to expect. And some of the things that were going on, some of the details that were added, made my reading experience of this much smoother and much more enjoyable. And so let's backtrack a bit. So whenever I say that the stories connect a little bit, they're in very different ways. You can see how there's one overarching story, but it is not one thing affects the entirety of the rest of the novel. It is something very specific from each story plays into a later story. So the Pacific Journal of Adam Ewing plays into the story of the amanuensis studying with the composer, in that the amanuensis finds the journal and he's reading it, and whenever he finds it, it's an incomplete journal, and he's really bummed out because he can't find the rest of the journal. The story of Louisa Ray, plays into the story of the amanuensis, because the amanuensis ended up writing the Cloud Atlas Sextet, and she hears this piece and she seems like she's heard it before, which is kind of an allusion to a reincarnation kind of thing. But so his story affects her story. The next story with Timothy Cavendish, he finds Louisa Ray's story called Half-Lives, or her article or something. I'm not quite clear on that. But Half-Lives, the first Louisa Ray mystery. And so he's this big publisher, and that's how he kind of comes across this story. Then the next story is where things get absolutely wild with Sonmi 451. She is like a human that is almost like AI-like, who has been bred to be a servant, and she leads this revolution. And one of the things is that she sees this film of Timothy Cavendish's story and basically gets inspiration from it to lead this revolution. The story with Sunmi 451, like I said, she's kind of this she's not really an android. She's a person, but she's kind of been like brought up to believe that she is like a servant. And that story towards the end, the revelation of what her people are, or what her class system is used for, is absolutely like devastating, very Soylent Green, hintity hint, wink wink. And yeah, that's totally wild to read, and you can totally be on her side as to why she's ready to lead this revolution. And in the movie, it shows one of the servants in this restaurant where Sunmi works has a collar on, and she tries to escape through the elevator, and the guy that runs the restaurant like hits a button and blows her carotid artery, and she bleeds out. And so, yeah, there's a lot going on, and it's not all like just, you know, little dialogue, and, you know, this is not a slow burn. And then in the final story, Sunmi 451 has basically become this like godlike figure to these far distant, primitive people, and they are like trying to help these outworlders figure out like where they can go next to settle. And then the novel goes back through and kind of concludes each of these storylines. So, yeah, Cloud Atlas, it was such a trip. I'm so glad I have a copy of this. And then there is actually, I want to say, a quasi-sequel. So, David Mitchell's The Bone Clocks. The Bone Clocks. I read it, and it's one of those that I have never really landed on how I truly feel about it. Reading it, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thoroughly enjoyed the storyline. It's a much more traditional book than Cloud Atlas, and it actually, in a lot of ways, fills in some of the gaps and questions that you might have after reading Cloud Atlas. And I really enjoyed it, but there was also a part of me where I was like, there was a part of me that was like, I didn't need that. I didn't need it. I mean, like, it's good. I don't hate it, but I didn't need an explanation. I didn't need you to give me some of the details that were quote-unquote missing. I think one of the beautiful things about this novel is that you can discuss and you can debate, and there's so much room for interpretation. So yeah, we've talked about some of the forms and some of the characters, and I mean, I've talked a little bit about like David Mitchell's ability to weave in and out of the different genres, and it's also so impressive that he is able to so accurately and authentically replicate like dialogues of different time periods. I mean, you really, when you get into a new story, you really feel like you have, you know, jumped in time or left a certain time period. But yeah, and the very, very far future, he's kind of come up with his own dialect, and I will admit it is a little bit difficult to follow. It takes a little bit of time to get used to, but it works, and I mean, it's like a nice cherry on top. It's like the nice middle of the novel, and I feel like this novel does a really good job of like becoming more and more complex towards the middle and then eases up as you get to the end. And so you're not like totally mind blown by the time you get to the ending of it. And if you haven't seen the movie adaptation, since that's how it really worked for me, I would say check out the movie adaptation. If you really like it, pick up the book, because obviously we all know like the books are better, like 99.9% of the time. But watch the movie, and if the movie intrigues you, then go ahead and pick up the book. And there's probably some book purists out there just like, no, don't you ever. But it really worked for me, and it really helped me to feel like I got this novel as I went through it. Like, I knew what was going on. I never felt like I was struggling to understand what was happening or the connections. So, yeah, the movie is fantastic. It stars, like, Tom Hanks, Hugo Weaving, Halle Berry, Hugh Grant. And what's really, like, cool about the movie is that all of those actors play different parts. And so as you go through each story, they each have like different roles in each story. So that's really cool to see. And I also love that this novel juxtaposes both the positive and negative endings. Like, they are perfectly alternated. Like, you have the Journal of Adam Ewing, which has a very positive ending. You have the story with the amanuensis, which has a rather devastating ending. You have the mystery with Louisa Ray, which has a good ending. Then you have the episode of Timothy Cavendish, which ends up having a good ending. Son Me 451s is kind of heavy, and then the final one is hopeful, if yet a bit heavy, and then you kind of backtrack. But yeah, so I don't just this book just sort of like blew me away. So yeah, in conclusion, if it's not apparent already, Cloud Atlas is an incredible book. And if you haven't been exposed a lot to like postmodern writing, I think that this is the absolute perfect entry point for that. Each and every one of the stories still follows a semi-traditional kind of format, but then the novel as a whole is very heady and intellectual and can kind of like stretch or challenge you in what you're used to reading. So that's going to do it this week, folks. I know probably once I edit this together, it is going to be pretty short and whatever, but just a little bit of like insight into what is going on with me right now. I am finishing up a semester teaching saxophone in college. I just started a new job at a local, semi-local ISD as a band director, and I am participating in a community theater run of A Christmas Carol. So there's a lot going on, and the reading has just had to take a little bit of a back seat, which is, fortunate and unfortunate. I'm very happy to be so busy, but also it's just really tough to find time to sit down and read like I was doing, and I get home at the end of the day, I'm just kind of like, nope, brainless, like YouTube, whatever. We'll get back to it. Anyways, I still have some really exciting things planned for the future. I am currently working my way through Salman Rushdie's newest novel. I'm going to do another video with Justin where we talk about Realm of the Elderlings, and then I want to do another video that talks about all the fun stuff I want to read in 2024. So thank you so much for joining me for this. Thank you so much for all of the views, all of the comments, all of the engagement. Even if you're correcting me, y'all, it's hard out here, and yeah, it takes a little bit for my brain to be able to keep up. But I appreciate you all so much. Please like, comment, and subscribe. I will keep the videos coming, and I will do my best to have something interesting to say every week. Thank you all so much, and happy reading. This not winning the Man Booker Prize is like Toni Collette not winning an Oscar for Hereditary.